So we got some interesting news coming in. I'm going to talk a little bit about how Chronicle 4 has kind of solidified and changed some lore in the game. But first off, let's talk about a couple updates that recently happened overnight here. So Bullions have been fixed. If you don't remember, yesterday we just reported that Bullions seemed to have been capped at 12. There were no more Bullions. We weren't going to be able to get any more. For some reason, the update came through and the data mining showed that we were no longer going to get Bullions for this season. Well, Blizzard released a blue post just yesterday saying that was actually a mistake. And in fact, we should continue to get Bullions throughout this awakened raiding season as this expansion comes to an end.
Shut up!
Damn it, I forgot to pause blurps. And basically, you're going to be able to get 2 Bullions this week. So your 13th and 14th Bullion will be available back-to-back, so you won't have to wait an extra week to make up for the lost time that the Bullions were not available. Some changes have been made. And these changes are related to the recent tanking changes. Tanking and healing is getting completely revamped, and not the best way. I personally don't like it. We talked a lot about it yesterday. If you missed it, you can go on the YouTube channel and check it out. But basically, Blizzard's trying to create less damage, but make the damage hurt more constantly. Like, tanks are supposed to be more squishy in a way, more healing required, more outside healing required, less damage mitigation, a lot of shit going on. And part of that change was supposed to be that they were going to basically nerf a lot of damage. And the first piece of nerf damage we saw was Fortified. So Fortified is in fact going from 30 to 20% increased damage. So that's a nice change if you're going to make tanks more squishy. They're also doing some other things to Mythic Plus. We see a couple different things like Unstable Chest Subjects Dark Barrage getting reduced by 40%. Null Slam going from 2.5 seconds to 1 second in terms of cast time, damage reductions for Void Rush by 20%, and then range of Venomous Spray increased to 60 yards was 40. I don't see how that helps. But basically they're trying to nerf damage across the board. Now again, I personally didn't think tanking was that broken, and for some reason they're trying to fix it. I actually think healers already have enough on their plate, and now that a lot of healers have gotten in the habit of kind of ignoring the tank and just dealing with the other people in the party. And now they're really going to have to focus on keeping that tank alive because they're just becoming more squishy. Some other damage mitigation changes and damage reductions here. We see Cosmic Simulacrum reduced by 50%. Cosmic Residue now ticks every second was 2. That sounds like it's actually a buff. Cosmic Shards deals 83% initial damage was 66 less periodic damage and 66% less periodic damage, 83% less initial damage. So a nerf there. A couple different things. There are some increases to some other bosses, but I don't know how those balance out yet in terms of raid training and everything else. So Blizzard's trying to do what they said they would do, and that's nerf damage across the board. They are taking feedback on these tanking and healing changes, so we'll see if they hold tight to them and actually stick to them. Chronicle. Boys and girls, Chronicle has revealed some interesting things about some WoW lore, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of the most interesting stuff. Now, it does get into chronological order of some things and, less interesting stuff, but here is some real things that I want to talk about. So, in addition to fixing some of the timelines, they made some changes or some different references to some old lore that we once knew. So, first things first, rather than referring to basically the world souls as we know them today as slumbering titans, as they did in previous installments of Chronicle, the entities buried within planets such as Azeroth and Argus are now simply referred to as world souls, with their ability to become titans now considered a potential path for them to take once they are finally awakened. So we see that that's kind of fitting the lore of the World Soul Saga now, where they're now no longer is it considered like, oh, titans are born within planets and they hatch out, and that's old lore now. That's no longer, it's basically been retconned. So now it's a world soul, and it can, I guess, lead towards the void or the or order with the titans and everything else, arcane, depending on the forces that act upon it before or once it is hatched. So interesting stuff. Again, I think Azeroth's ultimately going to be like the balancing of forces, the one to bring balance to the Force, the Anakin Skywalker. But we'll have to wait and see what actually happens. Another thing, while identical otherwise, the infamous cosmic chart now refers primarily to the Death Force as the Eternal Ones, rather than merely undead like it had on the charts in the first 3 volumes. So they're talking about right here. We see the forces of undeath, basically. And this used to say undead. Now it says the eternal ones. So kind of canonizing some of that Shadowlands lore that we so mistakenly had to go through. N'Zoth, some interesting updates on him. N'Zoth is now referred to as one of 5 old gods who ruled over the Black Empire, but it's still remarked that the Titans only found and imprisoned 4 when they first discovered Azeroth, implying that the 5th member of their cohort was still killed or disappeared prior to the ordering of Azeroth. Now, recently we've seen a bunch of lore come out where, you know, the theories of Xal'atath being the 5th old god, I think are kind of put away. I don't really think that's the case anymore, but there clearly is a 5th old god. It's still being emphasized in Chronicle. It's still being talked about. And who is this 5th old god? What's their importance? Will they show up in the World Soul Saga? I think the answer is yes. I do think we're going to find out who this 5th old god is, why they're so important, and maybe why they disappeared, because that's an interesting piece of lore as well. Last but not least here in these miscellaneous changes, the events of the Sylvanas novel are now recognized, with Sylvanas' internal thoughts regarding the jailer and her brief time in the Maw noted at the beginning of the book, as well as various points across it, such as during the events of the war crimes, her ascension to Wartrief by Muzala's hand, or her motivations during the burning of Teldrassil to start the 4th war. So, yes, Sylvanas lore canonized. I could care less about that. That kind of took a free fall as it entered Shadowlands. Sylvanas, I think, her lore could be redeemed in some way. You know, Chris Metzen's back. We'll see what he ends up doing with her. But for now, she's kind of shelved. Now, there were changes into specific expansions, but I think the most important ones are the most recent ones. So let's talk a little bit about some Shadowlands lore. Some light has been shed on the nature of the appearance of Varian Wrynn and Saurfang during the Sepulchre of the First One's, events, right? If you remember when Anduin kind of falls to his knees in the cinematic, and you see Saurfang and Varian show up and, help him basically break Charlemagne apart and break the curse of the jailer. Well, it turns out that was not actually their souls, but instead it was described as a vision of the light being given to Anduin, from the light being given to Anduin, rather than the actual spirits or echoes as some speculated in the past. With Anduin's recent relationship with the light, that's very interesting, actually, and I think it kind of creates some weird dynamics, because the fact that the light was able to be called down to the Sepulchre of the First Ones as well. It's an odd area. I mean, obviously, it's kind of canon that we were in a raid where probably light healing was being done and stuff, but the light's ability to call down an appearance of 2 souls, that's something I haven't really seen before in WoW lore, and we're going to get more light-based WoW lore going forward here as we get into Hallowfall and everything and the flaming light and what it all means. So, interesting stuff. I'm sure this lore will come up once again. Finally, confirmation has been given on the motivations of the dreadlords for now. Ah, yes. Pepe's dreadlords. Yes, what does it mean? What are the dreadlords going to do? I've talked a lot about this. They're an interesting group, and I feel like there's still things to come out from the dreadlords. For the dreadlords, rather than serving the master plan under Denathrius to use the jailer like many speculated, they and their master were genuinely loyal to Zilval's cause and stuck with him until the end, leaving their current motivations unclear. So this is an interesting one. What does it mean? It means we don't know what the hell the dreadlords are up to right now. We know they're all about infiltrating. We know they've infiltrated the light, right? We know they've infiltrated, obviously, the Shadowlands and everything else. What is their role in the Void? We'll have to wait and see. Have they been able to infiltrate the Void? Who knows? But the Dreadlords and Sire Denathrius, we know they're out there scheming, working, planning, as they always are, as Dreadlords always are. And we'll have to wait and see, does Sire Denathrius and the rest of the Dreadlords make some type of appearance at some point in the World Soul Saga?